Today we'll look at exceptions. What exactly are exceptions? What are the different types, their structure, and also some code examples. Okay, so to begin with, there are three kinds of exceptions. You have checked exceptions, runtime exceptions, and errors. Checked exceptions are exceptions which we can anticipate. Something like you're trying to open a file. It's possible that the file is not there. So this is something you can take care of in the program itself. Runtime exceptions and errors are both classified as unchecked exceptions because these are things that you cannot anticipate. For example, a runtime exception. In an application, a lot of objects, variables are passed between functions, between packages, right? So if you get a value which is not expected to be 0 and you're dividing something by it, there is an arithmetic exception, but you cannot anticipate what value might come, right? Again, an object is passed to you, but that object is never initialized, or there is some problem in the initialization, so you will get a null time exception. So that becomes runtime exceptions. And errors, like the system runs out of memory, even these things cannot be anticipated, and so we are not expected to take care of it. On the other hand, checked exceptions, you are supposed to take care of it either using a try catch block or you have to use a throws. Okay, so if you go over the documentation that's provided for Java, you can see that you have checked exceptions, okay, you have errors, and the third one, runtime exception. And runtime errors and runtime exceptions together make unchecked exceptions. The structure, the class structure, all the exceptions are part of throwable. So the throwable is the parent, and we have the exception classes that are derived from throwable. You have error, as I mentioned earlier, not in the hands of the application, it's something related to the system. Okay, and these can rarely be caught, so we don't put any code to catch them. On the other hand, exceptions, you will have checked and unchecked. So you see, runtime exception are the unchecked exceptions under which you have arithmetic. These are the common ones, arithmetic and null pointer exception. Also the index out of bound, which you find quite often in arrays. Okay, and all the others are checked exceptions, which means that if this exception is anticipated in your program, then you have to declare it using try catch or throws. Okay, we'll look at it, and this is the structure. So basically, object, which is the parent class of all objects in Java, then you have throwable, from throwable is derived exceptions, runtime exceptions, and all the other checked exceptions, and then you have error. Okay, so this is the class structure, and now we'll look at the code examples. Checked exceptions now. Checked exceptions have to be caught by try catch or by throws. Okay, so here I have a buffered reader. I will use it to read a text file. So here I have a file called as test.txt, which has some data, and will print it out. So you can see that here it will not compile. It's already giving me an error. It's giving me an error because I'm using a file reader, and a file reader expects a checked exception, file not found, which means I have to declare this. I have to declare this using throws, or I can use a try and catch. So if I use a try and catch, I'll have to do a try and catch this exception, which is file not found exception. Okay, I can just print it out. So fp dot message. Okay, if I do a try and catch, I don't need to throw this message. Okay, so this should be okay. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the data from this particular file. So let me read this line wise. And as long as it is not null, which means that I have not reached the end of the file, I will keep printing it out. Okay, so now you observe I've got one more error here. The moment I'm reading, it means that I can get a IO exception. That means I'm not able to read the data. So I have to handle this as well. Okay, so let me add one more catch. So you see, we have a file not found and IO exception. If you look at file not found, this is a child of IO exception. It's a child class of IO exception, which means that I can catch both of it using IO exception itself. So if I just do IO exception, that should be enough. Another thing you need to remember is that IO exception is the parent of file not found, which means that I cannot put it up. Okay, always the order of the exception should be from the least to the highest. That means if I do something like this, okay, if I put a IO exception on top of file not found exception, since it's a parent class, I will get a error here. It tells okay, let me remove this. So you see that it will say that exception has already been handled, has already been caught, because I have IO exception. If I run this program, it will give me a compilation error. Okay, so when you are catching multiple exceptions, always the parent exception should be in the end. Okay, and in this case here you will see that this will not compile. Okay, has already been caught because it has been caught by IO exception. Okay, so let me just remove this. Okay, and we can also handle multiple exceptions on the same line. So I can put let's say a index out of bound. This is a runtime exception. So I've just put it for to explain that we can catch multiple exceptions on the same line. Okay, and then we have finally. Finally is a block of code that will always run. Okay, so let me close the buffered reader here, and you see again it's giving me an error because here also it throws a IO exception. So I can add it in the method, or I can put a try and catch block. Okay, so let me put try and catch block over here. Run properly, the contents of the file are displayed. Now let me put a file that doesn't exist. Okay, so when I run this, okay, so what happened was, here it comes here, tries to read the file. Okay, the buffer reader, it's not initialized because it cannot find this file, no file or directory, so it will get the file not found exception, which is a subclass of IO exception. So it prints this, no such file or directory, and then it goes to finally, and finally it tries to close the file, but it's not able to close because BR is not initialized, it's null. So it says because it got a null pointer exception. We can also catch a null pointer exception, which is a runtime exception here. Okay, so you can always catch unchecked exceptions as well. So let's just, okay, and we'll run this again and see how different it is. Okay, so here because we put a null pointer exception, it just gave us a error here saying cannot invoke because BR is null. So you see, instead of throwing an exception, it's actually giving us a message. It is handling the exception cleanly, not throwing that something has gone wrong. We anticipated this could be null, and so we got this error. Okay, so this is all about exceptions. Checked exceptions, we handle it using try and catch block. We can have multiple catch blocks. We can catch multiple exceptions in the same catch block. If you have multiple catch blocks, you have to ensure that the parent class is always in the end. Okay, otherwise it will not compile. And then you have the finally block, which will always run irrespective of whether any exception is caught or not. Okay, and if we don't use a try and catch, we have to use a throws to declare checked exceptions. Null pointer exception is also a unchecked exception. Okay, but let me provide an example for unchecked exception. Okay, let's declare two variables. So this is something very simple, just dividing two numbers, two integers, and we should get the answer as 1. Okay, but let me make this 0. So anything divided by 0 is infinity, so this is not acceptable in maths. Here at least you should not divide any number by 0. So it's an arithmetic exception. So divide by 0, but you see that we did not get any error. It ran because in runtime this error is determined. We did not have to throw that exception or declare, catch it using try and catch. In applications, usually you will get some value, say of y, from some other function, and in that case, until you run it, until the program is actually run, you will not be able to determine that something is wrong in this operation. So these are unchecked exceptions which you don't have to declare. So this was about exceptions. You can find more details on the Java page, the tutorial. You can go over it to get an in-depth information. Also play around with the different exceptions, try it out, and post that attempt the interview questions video that I'll put up based on what has been taught today. Okay.